Is your podcast getting listeners but not turning into clients? There's a good chance that it's not your content. It's what you can't see. So I'm hosting a free podcast growth audit workshop where I'm breaking down the invisible gaps that are quietly costing you listeners, leads, and sales, and how to fix them without doing more. This is for you if your downloads feel inconsistent, you're not getting inquiries from your podcast, or you know that something's off, but you can't pinpoint exactly what that is. And yes, I will also show you how to audit your own show, or you can get direct feedback from me. You can grab your free spot by going to podcastingformoms.co/workshop. Once again, that is podcastingformoms.co/workshop. Because your podcast shouldn't just take time, it should make you money. Let me ask you something. Have you ever sat down to record your podcast and thought, why does this feel so hard? You have the microphone, you have the ideas, you even know your podcast could help grow your business, but somehow every episode feels like a struggle. Coming up with topics is exhausting, recording takes forever, and promoting the episode feels like another full-time job. And at some point, you just start wondering, maybe podcasting just isn't for me. But here's the truth most people don't tell you. Podcasting isn't supposed to feel this hard. If it does, it's usually not because you're bad at podcasting. It's because the way that you've been taught to podcast is fundamentally unsustainable. So today we're going to be talking about why podcasting feels harder than it should and the simple shifts that can make it feel dramatically easier. Let's get into it. Welcome to Podcasting for Moms, the show for moms in business ready to start, grow, and scale a podcast that turns their listeners into buyers. I'm Jenny Soneson, a podcast strategist and fellow mom entrepreneur. You're in the right place if you want to learn how to start and grow a podcast that attracts your ideal clients and really does the heavy lifting for you when it comes to selling your offers, all while balancing life as a busy mom. Are you ready to create a podcast that grows your income, impact, and influence? Let's make podcasting work for you because as moms, we know how to get things done. All right, let's jump into the episode. Hey, welcome back to Podcasting for Moms, a show that helps mom entrepreneurs start, grow, and scale a podcast that actually supports their business, not one that burns them out. Because around here, we're not interested in building podcasts that require 40 hours a week, complicated tech stacks, or constant content creation just to keep up. We're building sustainable podcasts. Podcasts that work with your life, your business, and the reality of building something that's meaningful in the margins of motherhood. And today we're going to talk about something that I see all the time with podcasters, the moment when podcasting starts to feel heavier than it should. When what started as something exciting starts to feel like another obligation on your to-do list. So if you've ever thought, why does this feel harder than everyone says it should? Then this episode's for you. One of the biggest reasons podcasting feels hard is because most of the advice out there makes it way more complicated than it needs to be. You're told you need a perfectly branded show, highly edited episodes, multiple social media posts for every episode, a YouTube presence, Pinterest graphics, email newsletters, blog post, reels, video clips, reels, short form content. And suddenly one podcast episode has turned into 25 pieces of content that you feel like you're supposed to create. No wonder podcasting feels overwhelming. But here's the thing. Most successful podcasters are not doing all of that. What they actually have is clarity and systems. They know what their podcast is for and they know what to talk about, and they know what their podcast is for, they know what to talk about, and they have a simple process for producing episodes consistently. Podcasting gets hard when you try to build a media company instead of a strategic podcast. Another reason podcasting starts to feel difficult is because every week feels like starting from scratch. You sit down and think, what should I talk about this week? And that one question alone has killed more podcasts And that one question alone has killed so many podcasts because without a framework, your podcast becomes a constant brainstorming session. And that's exhausting. Instead, sustainable podcasts are built around clear content buckets or frameworks. So for example, your episodes might rotate between teaching episodes, behind the scenes episodes, myth busting episodes, client case studies, and quick strategy shifts. Now, instead of asking, what should I talk about, you're asking, which category am I pulling from this week? And that one shift alone can make podcasting feel dramatically easier. Another one is that your podcast isn't connected to your business. And this is a big one. If your podcast isn't connected to your business, it's eventually going to feel like extra work because it is. When your podcast exists in isolation, meaning it's not tied to your offers, your expertise, or your audience's next step, you end up creating content with no real direction. And that's when you start thinking, what's the point of this? But when your podcast supports your business, everything changes. Your episodes become part of your marketing ecosystem. Your content reinforces your offers, and your podcast nurtures potential clients before they ever reach out. Suddenly, podcasting stops feeling like content creation and starts feeling like business development. Another thing is you're trying to do way too much. The other trap I see constantly is podcasters trying to do too much too quickly. They're doing video versions, weekly episodes, both interviews and solo episodes. They're promoting daily. They're trying to reach out to guests. They're repurposing content on every platform imaginable. But sustainable podcasts usually start with something so much simpler. And that is a realistic publishing schedule, simple episode formats, and a repeatable workflow. Because consistency doesn't come from motivation, it comes from simplicity. The easier your process is, the easier it is to keep going. And the longer you stay consistent, the more your podcast compounds. So how do we actually fix this? It really comes down to simplifying three things. The first thing is your strategy. So your podcast should have a clear purpose. You want to figure out, what role does it play in your business? Is it authority building, lead generation, or client attraction? Maybe a mix of all three? Maybe even a mix of all three. Once that's clear, then your content becomes much easier to create. The second thing you want to look at is your content structure. So instead of reinventing the wheel every single week, you want to build repeatable formats and frameworks for your episodes. This makes planning faster and recording easier. The third thing you want to look at is your production process. Your workflow should feel manageable, not like a second job. So you want simple recording setups, batching when possible, and streamlined editing or support if needed. Podcasting should feel like something you can sustain for years, not something that you burn out on after 6 months. So if podcasting has been feeling harder than you expected, I want you to hear this. That doesn't mean you're doing it wrong. It usually just means your podcast needs a little simplification, a clearer strategy, simpler systems, and a structure that supports your life. Because the goal isn't to just start a podcast. The goal is to build one that you can keep showing up for consistently, confidently, and without burnout. And if you want help simplifying your podcast strategy, this is exactly what I help entrepreneurs do inside the Podcast Growth Audit Workshop. We take a look at your show, your content, and your systems and identify exactly what's working, what's not, and what to focus on next. You can learn more about how to get signed up for the workshop by going to podcastingformoms.co/workshop or via the link in the show notes. And if this episode resonated with you, I'd love if you shared with another podcaster who might need to hear it. Because podcasting doesn't need to feel this hard. Sometimes you just need the right structure, and I'll see you in the next. All right, that's it. I'll see you in the next episode.